Welcome, everyone. Kate, you can come here. Are you okay? Yeah, lovely. There's a Sabaton there. And we've begun this new series for the next several weeks. We'll be talking about the 5 hindrances. And Sangamita gave a beautiful overview of them last week. And started with what do they hinder? And they hinder the mind settling and quieting in meditation, and they hinder us in our lives and in our relationships as well. So I wanted to start this morning just by opening up very quickly and asking if anybody is willing to name the 5 hindrances. And if you can't name all 5, name what you can. Collectively, let's nail these hindrances. What are they? Thanks. Desire, ill will, restlessness, lethargy, and doubt. Beautiful. Yay. The 5, well, not yay, but yay that we know them and we can name them. So just one more time, I'll say sense desire, and actually the group together has given them in the order that the Buddha gives them. Sense desire, ill will, lethargy, actually we did, and I've heard it both ways, but usually in the suttas it is lethargy, dullness and drowsiness is the 3rd. The 4th is restlessness, and it has another component, restlessness and remorse. Dullness and drowsiness, and lethargy and dullness and drowsiness, and restlessness and remorse. The 3rd and the 4th hindrance both have somewhat of a physical component and a mental component. And then lastly, skeptical doubt. These are the 5 hindrances. And so this morning we will be beginning a deep dive into sense desire. And it's very significant that the Buddha begins with this one. It is indeed the biggest hindrance in our lives and in our meditation. And it's the one that it takes more convincing for us to see it as a hindrance. It's usually very obvious to us that when we've got anger and ill will, there's quite an unpleasant component to that. When we've got, dullness and drowsiness, it's unpleasant. When we have restlessness and remorse, it's unpleasant. When we have doubt, I don't know, it's unpleasant. When we have desire, we're very used to it, and it kind of is running our lives. Not so obviously unpleasant to us. And we've had lots of hits from desire. We wanted this thing, we wanted this job, we wanted this relationship. This is sort of something that is a very big driving force in our lives. And I really want to take a dive into examining that this morning. And we'll talk about sense desire, sort of globally, the big picture overall in our lives. This session and next session, we'll get more specific about sense desire and how that operates and tangles us up and how to work with it specifically in meditation. But this one is just sort of a global sense desire. And in the Anguttara Nikaya, the Book of Twos, in Sutta number 12, a significant sutta, I say that about every sutta I mention here, the Buddha says that we have these two powers, and we have them. They're available to us now. This is not like a stream enterer. This is not someone who's, meditated for years and years. Just the human mind has these two powers. And the first one is the power of reflection. This is what makes us different than the elk that are walking around. We have, as human beings, this power of reflection. And the second power that we have right now is the power of development. And development specifically is developing our minds, training our minds in meditation. So I want to park on this first power that we all have, which is the power of reflection. And I'm going to try and guide us through the words of the Buddha, what the Buddha is suggesting for us to do with desire, to be reflecting on it and ways to reflect on it. And before we do that, I'm just going to back up. There was one more thing I want to say that I think is important about the 5 hindrances. The Buddha has given us these 5 hindrances, again, for our reflection, for our understanding, for our benefit. The 5 hindrances are universal. Anyone that sits down and tries to pay attention to their breath for 5 minutes will start to realize, oh my word, it's a mess in there. Like, oh my gosh. I mean, it's kind of remarkable. I actually, sadly, came to the Dhamma late, like as, 46, almost 47 years old. How could I have lived my whole life and not noticed I was breathing? Like, that's astounding. So the 5 hindrances, they're universal. They're not personal at all. And that's just such a relief. Your mind, yeah, it's a mess. Mine's a mess. My life, at times has been a real mess. But this is not because I'm, a hopeless case. It's just because I have had not exposure to wisdom teachings, and I've just been following what I've seen around me. This is the issue. So it's such a relief. There's no problem. You're just usual, regular, normal, typical. And you've got these 5 hindrances, and so do I. And they hinder our development. They hinder our clear seeing. They hinder our peace. They hinder us. That's why they're hindrances. And the last thing I want to say that the Buddha is teaching us with these 5 hindrances is that is what they come out of ignorance, and then they feed ignorance. They feed on ignorance, and they feed into ignorance. And this is the whole. Eventually, we're going to really see and clearly understand that ignorance. And this is what, because of our ignorance, we think that there's a me, and then the me manifests as these 5 hindrances, the me, the self. And you see it in little children, at age 18 months, me, and they're trying to get more cake, more toys, and we're doing the same. We just, it's a little more subtle and a little more sophisticated, but it's the same. So this is what the me does. And this is what the hindrances, that they prop up the me. And again, the hindrances feed on the me, and the me feeds the hindrances. And so as we are understanding the hindrances better and starting to disentangle from them and dismantle them in our habits, in our thoughts, in our lives, in our communication, in our meditation, we are tackling ignorance. Super important. And the first chapter the whole first chapter of our meditation life is learning to disempower these hindrances, learning to disentangle these hindrances. Because once there are times in our minds, in our hearts, that the hindrances aren't running the show, but the trained mind, the attention is running the show. That's the gateway, that's the doorway to deep meditation. And that's where we're going, every one of us. So this first big hindrance of sense desire, let's really use this power that the Buddha says we have of reflection. And let's look at the way that the Buddha is asking us, inviting us to look at and to understand sense desire, that actually, for a lot of us, is pretty much running the show. Absolutely.
Just a little more clarity or definition. What do you mean by ignorance?
Ignorance, yeah. Ignorance, the Buddha says that that it's unknown and unknowable, which he basically doesn't really say that about anything else. What is unknown and unknowable is the beginning of this whole samsara, this whole round of rebirth, this whole universe, this whole cosmos, this whole everything that we look at, know, feel, see, unknown and unknowable, the beginning. And where it does begin, Roddy, is with ignorance. This has all come out of ignorance. And that's why we need wisdom to find the answers, to find true meaning, true peace, true ease. Does that answer your question enough for now? So ignorance, Roddy, basically another manifestation of our ignorance that the Buddha has said is that we have these vipalasas, we have these distortions of perception. And the distortions of perception are completely coming out of our ignorance. And there's 4 distortions that we do. We take the impermanent to be permanent. We take what is pleasant, what is unpleasant as pleasant. We take what is suffering as not suffering, as desire. And that's what we're going to talk about right now. The third is we take something that is not a self. There is no me. It's just like a river. It's just a process. It's just cause and effect, 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 cause and effect. We take that to be me. And lastly, we take what's actually not very beautiful. It's unattractive as attractive. These are 4 distortions of our perception, of our understanding of life. And they're rooted in ignorance. And the Buddha is saying, if we use this power of reflection, if we use this power of development, we can absolutely see for ourselves. We don't need to take his word for it. And that's a great question. It actually relates very much to, I'm going to read a part of a very, like, for me, one of the most graphic suttas, where, wow, the Buddha does not pull any punches when he's talking to this wanderer. This is 2,600 years ago. The wanderer's name is Magandiya. And Magandiya, so there are, at the time of the Buddha, perhaps even now, Ria would know, at the time of the Buddha, they were called sadhus. Do you know that word, sadhu? Yeah, so spiritual seekers. And these would be individuals that would renounce just, regular life and then just start to wander in the wilderness, wander in the jungle on a spiritual search. And there were many, many at the time of the Buddha, and there were, and lots of them had lots of followers. There were all kinds of sects, all kinds of philosophies, religions, really. And Magandia was a wanderer. So he had, and his particular philosophy was, he thought that nirvana, like enlightenment or awakening, or like the meaning of life, the answer of life. He thought it was through having just as many experiences as possible. Just the more experiences, the more sense indulgences, the more experiences you have, the more enlightened you are. And he thought he called the Buddha destroyer of growth. He really didn't like, because the Buddha is teaching, renunciation, simplicity, that the answer isn't in sense experiences at all. That's actually the trap. So they're diametrically opposed in what they think. And so they have this conversation. So this is why the Buddha is not pulling any punches. So the Buddha starts by, and we're not going to do the whole thing, it's many pages, but you'll get the sense. So the Buddha is referring to when the Buddha was a layperson, and he was Prince Gautama, and there are many descriptions of his life, these 3 palaces, and he was one of the rich and famous, and then he'll describe, he had all these musicians, all of which were female. Okay. In the same way, Magandia, when I was still a layperson, I used to entertain myself with sights, sounds, smells, tastes, touches, known by the body that were likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasant, sensual, and arousing. Sometime later, having truly understood the origin, ending, gratification, drawback, and escape of sensual pleasures, and having given up craving and dispelled passion for sensual pleasures, I live, rid of thirst, my mind peaceful inside. I see other sentient beings who are not free from sensual pleasures, being consumed by craving for sensual pleasures, burning with passion for sensual pleasures, indulging in sensual pleasures. I don't envy them, nor do I hope to enjoy that. Why is that? Because there is a satisfaction that is apart from sensual pleasures and unskillful qualities, which even achieves the level of heavenly pleasure. Enjoying that satisfaction, I don't envy what is inferior, nor do I hope to enjoy it. Suppose there was a person affected by leprosy, with sores and blisters on their limbs, being devoured by worms, scratching with their nails at the opening of their wounds. They had cauterized their body over a pit of glowing coals. Do you know what this means? Okay, so it's a medical treatment that when you've got a wound, you can cauterize it. They still do this today. And now usually it's with chemicals or electricity. But at the time of the Buddha, they would cauterize a wound by taking a burning coal and touch the wound, right? And there would be relief. There would be relief when you had leprosy and you had all of this itches and terrible, terrible suffering, physical. You could take burning coal and touch to the wound and have a relief from that terrible itch. almost like what you're doing is you're desensitizing the nerves, right? You know, so, and this would be something that they would be seeing, like right there in front of them. I'd be very, very familiar with. The field surgeon would make medicine for them, and by using that, they'd be cured of leprosy. They'd be healthy, happy, autonomous, master of themselves, able to go where they wanted. Then two strong men would grab them by the arms and drag them towards the pit of glowing coals. What do you think, Magandia? Wouldn't that person writhe and struggle to and fro? Yes, Master Gotama. Why is that? Because that fire is really painful to touch, fiercely burning and scorching. What do you think, Magandia? Is it only now that the fire is really painful to touch, fiercely burning and scorching? Or was it painful previously as well? And Magandia answers, that fire is painful now. It was also painful previously. That person was affected by leprosy with sores and blisters on their limbs, being devoured by worms, scratching with their nails at the opening of their wounds. Their sense faculties were impaired. So even though the fire was actually painful to touch, they had a distorted perception that it was pleasant and would offer relief. And the Buddha says, in the same way, sensual pleasures of the past, future, and present are actually painful to touch, fiercely burning and scorching. These sentient beings who are not free from sensual pleasures, being consumed by craving for sensual pleasures, burning with passion for sensual pleasures, have impaired sense faculties. That's us. So even though sensual pleasures are actually painful to touch, they have a distorted perception that they are pleasant. So it's a tall order, but the Buddha is really inviting us to look hard, honestly, deeply at our craving, at our sense desire, and how it jerks us around. There are ways to do this, and like the Buddha, he would always give like the 1-2 punch, that the bad news and then the good news. The Buddha knows that the me, that our whole conditioning. Look at a young child. We want pleasure. We want pleasant experiences. What the Buddha is really telling us is to really get that fulfilled, it has to not be coming from the senses, because it's a trap. And that's what we'll talk about a little bit, that trap. But we can have a pleasure that's greater than the heavenly pleasure, a pleasure that's so much better than the greatest sex orgasm we've ever had, the most amazing meal, the most incredible, fun time, surfing, skiing, whatever. These are all coming from our senses. The Buddha says, and what the heart is really yearning is for a pleasure that is much, much richer, much, much more reliable than that, and doesn't get us on this wheel of, the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one, that will really, really be satisfying. So I'm sorry, I didn't tell you. The Magandia Sutta is in the Majjhima Nikaya, the middle length discourses, and it's Sutta number 75. Still in the Majjhima Nikaya later, this is Sutta number 139, the exposition of non-conflict. And again, a long sutta, and I'm just going to read an excerpt. And the Buddha lays out all these things that lead to non-conflict. And one of them is this, and then he expands. Know how to assess different kinds of pleasure. That's what we're really talking about today. Knowing this, pursue pleasure within oneself. That's what I said. But why did I say it? And this is something the Buddha does often. He gives a teaching in brief and then a teaching in detail. So he gave the brief one, know how to assess different kinds of pleasure. And now he's going to explain, this is what I meant. But why did I say that? Okay, there are these 5 kinds of sensual stimulation. What 5? Sights known by the eye that are likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasant, sensual, and arousing. Sounds known by the ear, smells known by the nose, tastes known by the tongue, touches known by the body that are likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasant, sensual, and arousing. These are the 5 kinds of sensual stimulation. The pleasure and happiness that arise from these 5 kinds of sensual stimulation is called sensual pleasure. Filthy, it's actually piss pleasure, if you directly translate it. A piss pleasure, common, ignoble pleasure. Such pleasure should not be cultivated or developed, but should be feared, I say. Now, take a mendicant who, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unskillful qualities, enters and remains in the first absorption. That's the first of the levels of deep meditation, often called jhana, which has the rapture and bliss born of seclusion, while placing the mind on the meditation object and keeping it connected. As the placing of the mind and keeping it connected are stilled, they enter and remain in the second jhana, the second absorption, the third absorption, the fourth absorption. This is called the pleasure of renunciation, the pleasure of seclusion, the pleasure of peace, the pleasure of awakening. Such pleasure should be cultivated and developed and should not be feared, I say. Know how to assess different kinds of pleasure. Knowing this, pursue pleasure within oneself. That's what I said, and this is why I said it. So the Buddha is not at all anti-pleasure. He knows how we're wired. He's the greatest psychologist. We are wired for pleasure, and meditation, it needs to have enough joy, enough pleasure that we start to get attached to it, hooked to it, and then everything will unfold, because eventually we go beyond this pleasure. We go to wisdom and clear seeing. But initially, we have to take a good, long, hard look at sense pleasures in our lives and how they run their show and how the ignorance in them, Roddy, they're always offering something that they absolutely never deliver. And we have to look at that and look at that and look at that. But we have to do it in a wise way. In the Dhammapada, super important teaching the Buddha gives us, the Dhammapada 290. He says, if by giving up a lesser happiness, one could experience greater happiness, a wise person would renounce the lesser to behold the greater. And that's what we're talking about. That we're going to, bit by bit, get less enchanted and less deceived by the sense world that's around us. We're going to see things more clearly. And as we're doing that, we're cultivating more and more contentment, ease, clarity in our minds, in our hearts, in our communication, in our relationships. And we're going to get more and more addicted and attached to a much more refined pleasure, pleasant. And that's the path. It is a path of happiness, but it does take a really honest, good, hard look early on. So the wise person would renounce the lesser. So we say it all the time. Ajahn Brahm has this great saying, that we're going to use wisdom power, not willpower. We're not going to, we're just not going to set ourselves up for like on some weird, severe diet, and then, oh, the sunset, can't look, too pleasant. Like, no, this is ridiculous. And actually some Buddhists do that. This is not that as you're developing in meditation, you should be becoming more alive, more present but we're going to use wisdom power. So this is not like, oh, I can't experience the pleasant, and shutting down. No. This is just understanding it for what it is. It's pleasant contact. I had an office mate, and I don't want to be disparaging. She's actually a very good friend. I'm still, like, I see her every time I'm in Vancouver. We're still in contact, well, bless her heart, she would get her lunch and have it on her desk and then she'd actually say to herself, now I'm happy. It's like, no, now you're going to have a really pleasant experience and it's going to feel good, but you're not happy. Like we need to unhook. We need to understand what real happiness is, and when we're feeling peaceful or easeful or like truly enjoying a sensual experience, fine, but understand this is a pleasant contact. That's what it is. And end of sentence. It's a pleasant contact. And this is a wonderful skill to have. This is a pleasant contact because then you can also be doing it with the unpleasant contact. And then you're developing much more tolerance. And then your field of experience is getting much more realistic because then you can actually be with unpleasant contact, which we have a lot of. We get triggered, we get impatient, and then you can be like, oh, unpleasant contact. And then you can really be real with, oh, this is impatience. And see, the 5 hindrances let us do that. It's not like, oh, I'm an undeveloped person and I'm you don't need to crap on yourself at all. It's just like, oh, impatience has arisen. So this shorthand, this code that's true, that's real. This is pleasant contact. This is unpleasant contact. End of sentence. Not like, oh, this is, fulfilling and now I'm happy. And oh no, it's going away. It's going away. And then no. And not like, oh, unpleasant, ooh, I was bad. No, just pleasant contact, unpleasant contact. It's actually kind of simple. We make things more complicated. Yeah. I feel like I've said a lot. There's so much more I could say, but we have a whole nother session on sense desire. And my intuition says to stop here. And please ask questions and please challenge what I'm saying, or please give an example of something you want to flesh out. I really invite that. This is a big topic. But it's just so important for each of us if we're really going to develop and unhook. There's a passage of the Bible, the Buddha, my past. The Buddha says, who will disentangle this tangle? There is a tangle, and we do need to disentangle it. And we need all the tools that we can get. Yeah. So please, and I'll go to gallery view. Anyone online that wants to make a comment or ask a question. Please, Marty.
Just make I noticed. I noticed recently, but like actually noticed instead of maybe experienced. I'm
true knowing. I was noticing that desire can feel good.
Mhm.
And I actually, even in my meditation today, I had like a bit of a reflection on that, that it's like tricks you into thinking, you think desire, you think something you want to kind of manifest, and it like makes you feel better. And so your story about the leprosy and the fire, that makes just so much sense to me. Yeah. But in my meditation, I kind of realized, before your story, I kind of realized that I was doing that. And just like let it go, like I was just using that keyword, let it go, like let that go. Just kind of had that realization. And then I actually had like a bit of a game-changing meditation for some reason. So I think maybe they were a bit linked, that I was able to actually let it go.
Absolutely.
And I became a lot more focused.
Totally.
And then I had another realization. I was focused first on a very like my whole, this is very personal, but my whole body.
Mhm.
And basically every out breath where I would feel something,
Mhm.
and then I would focus on that area. And I was like, oh, I was super focused. And then I kind of realized that. And then I went just to my face. So I like kind of, this was some advice I got a while ago, but it just, I think my point is just, it just takes a while to learn these things. So I went to my face, and then I was able to focus, and every out breath or somewhere on my face that would do something, and I was very interested in it. And then I went to here, and it was the same thing, but it was just like progressively getting more focused. And then I hit a point where I was like, then I started to lose focus, right? It was too, you use a word, it's coarse is the big word, or narrow, I guess, maybe.
Refined.
Refined, yeah. And then
Subtle.
Subtle, yeah. So
Yeah.
then I came back out and was able to regain my concentration.
So awesome.
So that, and this just happened, was just today. And so, yeah, I don't know if it, I had this desire thing, and I was kind of like, so anyway, it's funny, every day we talk, and we have these talks, and it's just like, yeah, okay. But yeah, I thought I would share that today. I had kind of a breakthrough on in the meditation on how I focus, I guess. I was able to focus a lot better. So now I'm quite excited to do it again. But I was also, honestly, like, yeah. And I also I was like, whoa, this is really working. And then I was like, now you're losing focus, dude. So anyway.
And so awesome, Roddy. Yeah. Yeah.
Just
And
a year of meditating.
just a year, geez, it's amazing. There is one thing I didn't talk about, that desire, it is great to, desire does run the show. And so what the Buddha is suggesting is that we start to have much more skillful desires that have, that are rooted not in all of this crazy delusion and ignorance that we have. So it is like the Buddha is clear. The first hindrance is sense desire. It's not desire, it's sense desire. And we actually need desire on the path. We need to be desiring increasing wholesome states of mind and decreasing unholy, etc., etc. The Buddha uses our wiring. We have to use our wiring, and our wiring is desire. I mean, we all, there's a desire to live. Turns out there's also a desire to not live, and that's also. Now I've gone off. Sorry. Stop.
That makes sense. Like, and that's what I was experiencing.
Yeah.
More sense desire, or like I would describe it as craving. Craving an outcome in the future, and how that you can attach to that and actually can feel relieving, feel good. But it's relieving also. And like you said, I think in your talk, it rarely actually happens that way, if ever, right? So it's.
So Roddy was just talking about, there was a craving for this certain outcome, And see, that's the thing, Roddy. You were being really honest. There is a hit in it. There's a pleasure in it. There is. And that's why I think it's the first of the hindrances. All the others, we're kind of on board to get them out of our mind and out of our life. But sense desire, don't tell me that my coffee's not, or whatever it is. Please.
Just a meditation that I do sometimes, not all the time because I mostly just do breath, but I work on pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. And I'll just sit on my deck and I'll listen. It'll be through the sense desire of listening. But I'll hear a car go by with a big loud motor, unpleasant, let it go. I'll hear some birds chirping in the tree, pleasant, let it go. Nothing happens for a while, it's neutral. And sort of just, I find that kind of helps a bit.
Absolutely. Exactly. Yeah, the more we can be just pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. I remember one time I got sick, and this was great for me. I was in a kuti at Sadi Sarania. It's like, I don't know, 0 degrees outside. And I keep having to get up, go down this ladder from this loft, and run outside and throw up. And it was amazing. It's just like, this is really unpleasant. But I wasn't, it was a breakthrough for me. I didn't have a story. I did you can be with pretty unpleasant experiences and just realize, oh, unpleasant. Please, Corey.
That was beautiful. That was lovely, Roddy. That's great. I remember Ajahn Sona sort of saying, our biggest amount of work is to examine the hindrances.
Absolutely.
But I wanted a bit of clarification because I have a bit of all of those hindrances. But I've always identified with restlessness as primary. And I thought that restlessness was one of sort of the hardest ones to get rid of. But I'm sort of hearing that probably sensual desire is like once we master that. But I have always sort of thought I've heard restlessness is sort of the last to go in terms of the hindrances, and it's one of the hardest. So maybe I've heard that wrong or made that up in my mind.
No. So everyone heard that question? Yeah. So there are these 10 fetters, and it's and at the first stage of enlightening, when you become a stream enter, the first 3 are cut. At the second stage of enlightenment, the next 2, which are sense desire and ill will, they're the fetters. At the second stage of enlightenment, it's the only stage of enlightenment where a fetter is not cut. They are like kind of, the Buddha never says half-life, but I mean they're attenuated. And then at the third stage of enlightenment, they are cut. That's huge. I mean, that you have no more ill will and no more sense desire. Like that's profound. Very, very, very far on the path. And then the final stage of enlightenment, arahant, the last 5. And one of them, Corey, is restlessness. So that's why you've heard that. Sense desire and ill will are very coarse. That they're very big and very coarse, and it tends in meditation, not in life, but in meditation, when you are dealing with restlessness or dullness and drowsiness, restlessness, doubt, they tend to be somewhat less coarse. I mean, they can have pretty coarse, but restlessness, Corey, is actually very linked to sense desire and very linked to ill will. That's what the restlessness is. that you know, you want something a little bit different, you know, you're just not content. And that so they're, those are rooted in the coarse ones. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And then that subtle restlessness at the very, very end, that's just the residual of it's because the universe, like everything, you know, we think that all these things are solid, but I mean, scientists tell us it's because of this. It's because everything is vibrating and fluxing. You know what it is? It's this. So it's okay. They're online. You just can't see them. Oh, well, son of a gun. Thank you. Okay, it's all going to come back.
Wow.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, and we're actually at time. So, and we're on the third week. So the Brahma Vihara that we are going to conclude with is mudita, such a quick road to uplift and happiness. It's rejoicing in the great things, the good things that are happening in those around us. It's a sympathetic joy that you know, you got a promotion and I applied for the job too, but I'm so happy. I'm so happy you got it. You know, it's that. It's a beautiful quality. You know, in our culture, we try and cultivate it. We're trying to cultivate it. I see sometimes in sports, you know, like the whole team can rejoice in the goal, and then, you know, it'd be really profound if the whole team could rejoice in the other team's victory. That would be Buddhist. That our culture's not going that far, but anyway. So why don't we? Would you mind? You're just going to turn to your neighbor because we're out of time, so we can't go around. But you just turn to your neighbor and say something that is that's bringing you joy in your life at this time, and your neighbor can rejoice in that. And people online, Sharon and Sarah, you could put it in the chat, and we'll all experience mudita for you. Great.
Okay.
Great. Okay, Silka, can you be my partner?
Yeah.
Great.
Sunshine. Okay. I'm really happy, Kemba, that we have summertime and we have got light. And
You're happy about
I'm happy about that. About the changes.
Yeah.
Timing. Yes.
Yeah.
That's my happiness.
The length of the day.
Yeah.
Totally. I went out around
Yesterday,
last night.
yeah, and you could still see.
I could still see. Nice.
And now at 6 o'clock in the morning, it's starting to.
Yeah. I mean, we're past the equinox, right?
Yes, we are. Yeah. So for the next 6 months,
Yeah.
the days are longer than the nights.
Yeah.
I live for that desire. I get it.
Yeah.
What's your happiness?
The song of Mrs. on retreat. 100%. Yeah.
Well,
100%.
can't wait to hear what that's like. She could hear us, right? Okay, well,
Would you mind doing a little song?
yes. My desires, not ridiculous.
And Sarah's very mundane. That's fine. I got together everything I need to get my. Oh yeah, no, that's I had so much joy when that would happen.
Yes.
Much mudita.
Yes.
Great. Beautiful.
I'm hitting the wrong buttons in chat, so I just say
Oh,
enjoying
please do
the
share.
sun.
Enjoying the
Enjoying
sun.
the sun as
Okay,
well.
Great. Yes. And my partner was the days are longer than the nights now. Yeah. so much mudita for everyone, and I have so much mudita that you're all come in contact with the Buddha's teachings, and you're and they're taking root in your lives, in your hearts. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May we be benefiting from our desire to grow in our wisdom and in our peace and in our love, and may it be of benefit to all the beings around us and all sentient beings. Sadhu. Thank you, everyone, so much.